Blue light.
Hi. Oh my god, this angle is horrible. Hi, it's Reid from Reidville. New channel name. Forgive me, I'm a little congested, and in my basement, which is not too aesthetic, maximalist, collector core. I'm here with a new video after like 6-ish months, because I'm like, let's get back on that YouTube grind for my 6 subscribers. But this is gonna be a nice video. It's easy queer reads for the summer. I don't know about you, but summer is like my favorite time to like crunch on books. And I'm calling these books like easy/light just because they're not too long, maybe 350 pages max per book. Some of them are a little shorter, you know. These are like my essential queer reads, what I tell people trying to get into queer lit. Some talk about queer history and moments of struggle, but these books overall are not about the devastating queer story. These are more light-hearted in the sense of how queerness is talked about. Queerness is just embedded in the characters. It's not like a story of queer struggle, which I think is really important to be talking about because, like, I mean, it's Pride Month, but also there's so much happening in the world that we need to remember queer love is the light, you know? Self-love as a queer person is so important. I don't know, I want to see more stories of queer happiness, queer joy, queer and trans joy specifically. This is the part where I ramble for a really long time about how I chose the books to talk about because they are not stories of survival or struggle, mainly. Why I'm calling these more lighthearted or lighter, just because not only the page count, but these are just stories with queerness, like, matter of fact. So, I don't know if I said any of that right. First one is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. This is honestly an essential read for queer people in general, or anybody really into like classic fiction. This book is set in 1950s Paris, and it is literally not even 200 pages. I blew through this in a few days. I'm kind of a fast reader, but I honestly didn't want to finish it so fast. It was just so, like, it drew me in. His writing is so beautiful, and queer desire is the main focus of this book, and it also is a story that talks about like authenticity and fluidity within queer identity. It's just honestly talk about queer desire and the fear of queer desire, and I think it's just a beautiful novel. So that's my first book, Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. I do want to read more of his work. I knew the name before I knew how much fiction he had written, but I am hoping to read more. The next book was my favorite book when I read it. It was the first book I got through after missing out on reading for a long time just because of school, transferring schools, doing all this stuff during college. It's The Guncle by Stephen Rowley. But this, honestly, like, I don't remember if I saw it online at the time I saw it. I was honestly really intrigued. The Guncle, what could that be? Honestly cool to read because it's a modern story of love and loss. This is a story of a family that loves each other. The main character is Patrick O'Hara. He's a soap opera actor, and he's kind of been out of it for a while. He lives in like California, Palm Springs, and he's kind of like not really present in his family, but his best friend, aka his brother's wife, passes away, and it does start with a lot of loss and kind of figuring out where does he go from there, and he ends up having to take care of his brother's kids, and he was not used to being around children. He was kind of like at his life aside from his entire family, and it talks about love and loss as a queer person, but it's not centered around loss. It may not be about romantic love necessarily. Honestly, I thought it was a very funny book just because of the niche references that it talks to, like, about niche references to queer culture. It really made my heart flutter. It was just like, it just made me feel very happy, and it was cool to see something with a queer protagonist that focuses on his queerness, but it's more about who he is as a human versus like aesthetic queerness as an aesthetic. And I don't know, I just thought it was really cool. and it opened my eyes to like more queer lit, just queer fiction in general that isn't focused on like struggle or necessarily romantic love. I don't know, I thought it was very wholesome. The last book I'm going to talk about is my most recent read. I don't have it with me because I gave it to my partner to read, and it's Politics the Form of a Mortal Girl. I've heard about it online and I picked it up. Like, the second I saw it, I looked at a few bookstores and I picked it up. I didn't have to. I'm going to go to the library more, but I thought, you know, I've heard things about this book. I might want a physical copy for myself. Set in 1993 in Iowa, this isn't a spoiler. Paul is a queer young man who can shapeshift. I honestly wasn't sure if it was just like a gender fluid situation. Like, no, it's like a legit fantastical feature of him. Queer and trans people can be shapeshifters in a sense of like, there's just the fluidity of identity. And honestly, I was like, I didn't know it was like a fantastical thing for this book. It is, and it's very subtle, and it's very humorous, and it does have a lot of like sexual desire as its focus, but it is honestly about navigating the world as a queer person who doesn't exactly know who they are at the time, who has an idea about who the person they want to be is, but it's also kind of a coming of age story about somebody navigating the world in this time period specifically. And it talks about the AIDS movement, and that is my like main trigger warning for this book. It does talk a lot about that, but I found a lot of it just to be just significantly meaningful, the way in which queer life amongst this time is framed. And the author, Andrea Lawler, they say things so like matter-of-factly again, which is kind of like one of my favorite things about queer fiction I've been reading. They don't hesitate to talk about queer life vividly. None of these books necessarily do. Written by queer people, for queer people, and I just honestly thought it was a very heartwarming novel to see somebody navigating the world and being a very fluid, identifying person. And I haven't read a lot, like, as a non-binary person, it was very rewarding and validating to see somebody with the kind of presentation of the main character. It talks about queer sexual desire, so there is a lot of sexual content, and it talks about the AIDS movement as well. But those are my main two, like, trigger warnings for those. If you want more content warnings, honestly, I would say go to Goodreads or Storygraph, whatever, search up content warnings, but I think I mainly talked about them in this video. So if you want to hear more book talk stuff, or if you want more videos, comment below. Hi, I'm Reid. Like and subscribe.